Here is a picture of God. You didn't know he looked like that, did you? Yeah, he's a benign old man up in the sky, looking down lovingly upon all his creatures. Oops, what's that? 20 million people killed in Stalin's Russia. Oh well, never mind about that. Anyway, here we are, the Christian God, looking down upon us. And it even says in the Bible that God loves us. So it must be true, because it's in the Bible. Oh, what's that? 30 people die of cancer, some painful, horrible death. Well, what do you say about that, Mr. God? Well, he doesn't say anything. That's very strange, isn't it? People for the last N,000 years have been praying up to God saying, there's terrible things happening to me. I got cancer, my leg's rotting off. I've got heart disease, my brain's going, I've got Alzheimer's. And they pray up to this character and they hear absolutely nothing. Silence. So, is this kind of God really the kind of God that we want? Because if in our times of distress we hear nothing and nothing changes, then he's fuck all use, really, is he? A lady that I knew a long time ago, who knew Gurdjieff, recounted that when she met him, she was a Christian, and she was telling him of her faith and her belief, and without any warning he said, I shit on your God. God not offended. Well, why did he shit on her God? Well, he shit on it because it was just imagination. And why wasn't this God offended? Well, he wasn't offended because actually he doesn't exist. I don't know if you've seen Christopher Hitchens. If you haven't, I would suggest you go to YouTube and have a look. A very brave man who died with esophageal cancer. I think it was probably 4 or 5 years ago, maybe a little bit more. But anyway, very brave man. And he said, if there was a God up there looking down on me, I would disown him, because I don't want anybody looking down on me. How heretical, how terrible. Anyway, there we have the dominating Christian view of God, and it's just all bunkum. So let's have another look at God. The Gnostic view. Now, you may have heard of the Gnostics. The Gnostics are very strongly associated with Christianity in reality, and some say it is the real Christian tradition. But in actual fact, the Gnostics were around before Christianity, at least 1,000 years. And it may have derived from Egyptian beliefs. Nobody really knows. And it may even go back before then. But let me quote this from a novel, in actual fact, written by Lawrence Durrell. It's actually a series of novels called the Alexandria Quartet. But it is not straight from a Gnostic text, but it does describe Gnosticism and the spirit of Gnosticism very, very accurately. So, the bitter central truth of the Gnostics, the horrifying realization that the world of the good God was a dead one, and that he had been replaced by a usurper, a god of evil. It was the deep realization of this truth and its proclamation that had caused the Gnostics to be suppressed, censored, destroyed. Humanity is too frail to face the truth about things, but to anyone who confronts the reality of nature, and of process with a clear mind, the answer is completely inescapable. Evil rules the day. What sort of God, the Gnostic asks himself, could have organized things the way they are? This munching world of death and dissolution, which pretends to have a saviour and a fountain of good at its base. What sort of God could have built this malefic machine of destruction, of self-immolation? Only the very spirit of the dark, negative death trend in nature, the spirit of nothingness and auto-annihilation, a world in which we are each other's food, each other's prey. I couldn't have said it better myself. Now the problem is when people read and see things like this, they might become despondent. You can sort of understand that, but despondency is not the way to go. And as the title of this podcast indicates, there's more to you and I than meets the eye. We can create ourselves. And in fact, it's well known that in the Old Testament, in one of the Psalms, it said, "Ye are gods." And in fact, Jesus in the New Testament repeated that. He said, "Ye are gods." So what kind of thing can we make of that? Is it just an ego gone mad? Or is there some kind of truth in it? Is it possible that we can create ourselves? We can create something that is beyond the basic animal that we're given when we're born. And to some extent, transcend the horror that I've just read out in that quote from Lawrence Durrell's book. Well, the answer is yes, and the route to it is through understanding. Many people think that understanding is kind of like a passive thing, but it isn't. And I'm going to use a quote from Spinoza in a moment. Just let me reference a few things. I've put a link below to a YouTube video showing the treatment of animals in various slaughterhouses and factory facilities. If you are a sensitive person, do not watch it. If you do watch it, you can skip to about 2 minutes in, past the annoying, nauseating woman who's displaying how fit she is, because she's a vegan, and go straight to the hard matter of the video. One of the things that's in there that surprised me a great deal, actually, is that in the United States, actually in many countries, in egg production plants, where chicks are selected, the males are basically pulled out on a production line, and they're batched together, and they're thrown into a mincer alive. And the particular example on the video is a factory where 150,000 male chicks are minced alive every day. And of course, around the globe, that is billions per day. Just unbelievable agony and suffering on this wonderful world where Papa God looks down lovingly on all his creatures and bestows his benediction. So how do we make sense of all this, and how do we transcend it and make life different for ourselves? Well, I've called upon good old Spinoza, and part 5 of his Ethics is concerned with liberation. Now, liberation sounds like you somehow transport to a different world, which isn't the case. It's just that you have a level of understanding, which means that you become free of many of the sources of pain that exist in this world. Now, let me read this fairly slowly because there's a lot of things in here that need to be explained before the quote can be really understood. So he says, insofar as we contemplate God or nature. For Spinoza, God and nature are the same thing. And notice he uses the word contemplate. Contemplation isn't some sort of dopey-eyed imagining. Contemplation is thinking about, meditating upon, logically confronting things within our mind to try and gain some kind of understanding. So insofar as we contemplate nature, and I hate the word God, you know, it doesn't matter who you are. If you live in the West, God is this old man up in the sky. So I'll use the word nature. Insofar as we contemplate nature, we are active. So contemplation is an active pursuit. Now, if you understand all the background to Spinoza, you will know that being active is doing something that comes from your own self. There's nobody else interfering in there, making you do it. There are no kind of pressures being felt within yourself. You're just doing it for the love of it. So insofar as we contemplate nature, we are active. Some people have this desire to contemplate their existence and existence in general, and a lot of people don't. People who don't sort of seem to have the simpler, more fortunate life, in that they can live at a fairly superficial level and seem to get away with it. In reality, they don't get away with it. There are all kinds of statistics showing the level of mental illness in the world. It's very high. Anyway, so to be active is to contemplate upon things, to use the reflective intelligence that we have, which is kind of unique. Consequently, there can be no pain accompanied by the idea of nature. Now, isn't that an interesting thing to say? Because what he's saying is that when we are active, then we do not experience pain. When we are, how can I put it, in our own self, when we are contemplating on our own terms, we are active, and actually there is no pain in there, particularly if you understand the rules and the laws by which everything operates, which is the thing that Spinoza goes into in great depth within the Ethics. And then one of the strangest sentences in the whole of the Ethics is the next one. Insofar as we understand God or nature to be the cause of pain, which of course it is, we to that extent feel pleasure. Why do you feel pleasure? Even though you are contemplating something that is painful. You feel pleasure because you are active. You are not passively sitting by, just letting external influences dominate you and possibly cause you pain. I'll give you just a simple example. So, if you do watch that video on YouTube about the dreadful treatment of animals, it will cause you some pain. It causes me some pain. But you can bring understanding to it. Understanding says that the strong shall dominate the weak. This is the way the universe has been made. It's a point that Spinoza makes over and over again. The strong will dominate the weak. Why wouldn't they? What is there to censor that behavior? Nothing. This is the way the universe has been made. And so one can contemplate what is happening in that video, and the laws of the universe are just running as they should. Now that doesn't mean that you don't have feeling for what is going on in there. What it does mean is that you create some kind of understanding, and that understanding actually brings some level of liberation from the pain that is caused by that thing. It's hard to explain. It's something you have to practice. It doesn't mean you don't feel pain, because he's saying insofar as we understand that God or nature to be the cause of pain, pain never ever goes away. But there is another thing that can happen on top of that, through having real understanding of why those things are happening. And that understanding itself is a pleasure. More than that, it's a joy. So, when Jesus said, "Be in the world and not of it," we're still in the world. We still get cancer. We still see these horrible things happening on that video. We still have a partner that cheats on us. Whatever happens. So at that level, the pains are real. But if you develop understanding, then there is something else within you that actually experiences some level of pleasure in understanding what are actually quite damaging and harmful events. It's very hard to practice that. It requires a lot of work, it requires a lot of understanding. But there is a quote in Proverbs, I think, in the Bible, that says, "Above all, get understanding." And so what is really taking place here is that you create yourself through understanding. You create basically a new part of yourself that didn't exist when you were born. And that part of yourself is free. It's free because it understands. And so I create myself is very, very true. It's the same thing that Gurdjieff talks about. Creation of a permanent I. Does this I exist after death? I don't know, and personally I don't care. I have no real no real desire to exist beyond death of the physical body. But maybe it does, maybe it doesn't. Spinoza indicates that it does, but it's not an issue for me. So we create a part of ourselves that is what Luis Almeida calls the eye of understanding.